Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it's a great honour and privilege to be invited to address you. Let me begin with a direct question and direct answer. Is China a currency manipulator? Yes. Is its currency fundamentally misaligned? Yes. In the absence of currency intervention by the Chinese monetary authorities, the renminbi-dollar exchange rate would be significantly different, I believe. And are we living through the end of what I've called, with my colleague Moritz Schularik, Chimerica's demise, by which I mean that fusion between China's and America's economy that has been the driving force of global economic growth for the past decade? How important has the Chinese currency policy been to China's growth? Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, China's gross domestic product has increased by a factor of roughly 4 over the past 10 years, its exports by a factor of roughly 5, its current account surplus with the rest of the world by a factor of roughly 17. Its share of American non-commodity imports has gone up from 10% to 24%, and as you are all well aware, its share of the US current account deficit has also grown. In the period of the past 10 years when China's export-led strategy was really crucial to its growth, there was minimal appreciation of the Chinese currency relative to the dollar, say about 15% between 2005 and 2008. For the rest of the decade, China pegged its currency firmly to the dollar. Why did it do this? One, because it made its exports more competitive in global markets. Two, because it allowed it to accumulate reserves as a kind of insurance against financial crisis. The Chinese did not want to experience what much of the rest of Asia experienced in 1997-98. And because the Chinese authorities have considerable control over their own banking system, this policy did not give rise to domestic inflation in the way that standard macroeconomic textbooks predict that it would. This kind of policy isn't supposed to work, according to economists. I have the advantage of not being an economist. I'm an historian, and so I can assure you that it does work as long as reserve accumulation is sterilized by the monetary authorities and does not translate into domestic inflation. It's worth bearing in mind that there is a close link between China's currency policy and the massive financial crisis that we are still living through and have been in since August of 2007. Not only did China's policy squeeze other manufacturing exporters, crucially, it had the effect of depressing long-term interest rates in the United States by between 100 and 200 basis points. Without that stimulus, it's hard to believe the housing bubble in the US would have been as large as it was in recent years. How does China compare with other countries that have pursued this kind of strategy in the past? That's one of the central points I make in my written testimony. And the answer is that compared with West Germany and Japan after World War II, this is a very different story. They had export-led strategies, but they did not accumulate reserves on this massive scale, and nor did they resist pressure to appreciate their currencies. Between 1960 and 1978, the Deutschmark increased by 60%, the yen appreciated by around 50%. China's undervaluation is very significant today, however you measure it, and we all approach this in different ways. In our research, Moritz Schularik and I look at a real exchange rate adjusted for unit labor costs. And we find that on that measure, China has made a competitive gain of the order of 40% relative to its trading partners. So that 15% appreciation of the renminbi that we saw in the middle of this decade hasn't really counted that massive benefit that China gets from its productivity gains and its very low unit labor costs. Can this continue is a crucial question. Many people believe that it can. The US deficit is back with the first green shoots of recovery. China's surplus never went away, although it said it will disappear briefly this month. The US is still borrowing, indeed borrowing on a much larger scale than ever before in peacetime. The Chinese still need Americans to buy their goods. There are those people who think that this strange disequilibrium can somehow be resumed in the aftermath of the crisis. I think this is wrong for two reasons. One, there is some limit to US recovery as long as China and the other currencies that shadow China's currency policy overvalue the dollar. Secondly, there is now a sign of dangerous overheating in China's economy. It is in their interests also to do something about this before they have a bubble, the consequences of which will not be confined to China. But we need not only revaluation of the renminbi, we also need a significant change in Chinese policy in order to encourage domestic consumption, and we urgently need serious fiscal reform in the United States to do away with the notion that this country can run trillion-dollar deficits for the rest of time, which is, of course, the current implication of policy. I come in conclusion to what should be done. Yes, I think the Treasury should brand China a currency manipulator. But no, I do not think this is a good moment to threaten or impose retaliatory tariffs against China, and here is why I think that. I'm an historian. This is not 2005 when Congress last threatened tariffs against China. We are in the middle of something that very nearly became a Great Depression, and we should remember how in the past, in 1930-31, congressional policy on protectionism deepened that depression, and some historians would say made that depression. There is a danger not only of a trade war or a tariff war, there is also a danger of a currency war. And we are already seeing other countries using unorthodox methods to drive their fiat currencies down below the dollar. Not everybody in Europe is shedding tears over the Greek tragedy. As it weakens the euro, it benefits European manufacturers. Brazil, too, is trying to soften its currency. Thirdly, and crucially, I don't believe renminbi appreciation on its own will be of massive benefit to the United States. I'm very skeptical about Paul Krugman's claims that it would significantly reduce unemployment in this country. The main beneficiary of the Greek tragedy, as it weakens the euro, it benefits European manufacturers. Brazil, too, is trying to soften its currency. Thirdly, and crucially, I don't believe renminbi appreciation on its own will be of massive benefit to the United States. I'm very skeptical about Paul Krugman's claims that it would significantly reduce unemployment in this country. The main beneficiaries of ending the renminbi dollar peg would not in fact be the United States, but would be China's trade competitors in emerging markets, who are the real losers. They're the ones who've been losing market share when you look at the structure of US imports. In conclusion, I think we also need to be very wary of the more aggressive, indeed pugnacious attitude of the Chinese today, not only with respect to Google, but also, I believe, across a broad range of issues from Taiwan to Tibet. The Chinese authorities are spoiling for a fight, and the United States Congress must be very, very careful about giving it to them. A bestseller on economic policy in recent years in China has the title Currency Wars by Song Hongbing. I believe we are on the verge, maybe already in the middle of currency wars. And we should be careful that the market reaction to a trade war or currency war between the United States and China does not exceed in its negative effects the benefits, which I believe would be minimal, of renminbi revaluation. Chimerica is dying, but we must ensure that it is an amicable divorce and not a currency war. Thank you very much.